Hey everyone, welcome back. Picture this, towering sandstone cliffs stretching across Mali's landscape, ancient mud brick dwellings clinging to sheer rock faces, and a mysterious people who carved out a home from the earth itself, literally. Today we're diving into one of West Africa's most captivating stories, the Tellem of Mali. These were the original cliff dwellers, architects of the sky, puzzle pieces in Africa's human tapestry, and their legacy is still hanging on the face of the Bandiagara escarpment. The Tellem weren't your average ancient community. Imagine a group of people who looked at a wall of rock and said, "Hey, that's the perfect place to build a house." And not just one house or two houses, but a whole village. Think of them as high-rise living residents. The Dogon people, who arrived later, even called them the people we found here, like a chapter in a mystery novel left half read. Much like their predecessors, the Toloi people. So who were the Tellem really? Where did they come from? And why did they choose to live like mountain goats, scaling cliffs that would make even the most daring rock climber think twice? That's what we're unpacking in this episode. As we are taken through their history, their ingenuity, and the secrets they left behind, from their origins to the roots they planted, quite literally, in the rock, we will learn who these people really were. Let's set the scene. The Bandiagara escarpment. This is no ordinary ridge of rock. It's a rugged golden brown wall that stretches for over 150 kilometers across Mali's Sahel region, reaching heights of up to 500 meters. Imagine standing at the base of this natural fortress, eyes squinting against the sun as you gaze upward at ancient dwellings tucked into the cliffside like honeycomb in a giant hive. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a reminder of human resilience and creativity. But back then, it was both a home and a safe haven, a place where the Tellem could carve out their lives, both literally and figuratively. Archaeologists believe the Tellem first arrived here around the 11th century CE, though some scholars think their presence might go back even further. They were not the first people to explore these cliffs. Earlier cultures like the Toloi have left their mark in burial sites and pottery fragments. Yet it was the Tellem who left the most enduring legacy, an entire civilization built into the rocks. And let's talk about why. Imagine the threats of life in the Sahel, a place of harsh dry seasons, unpredictable rains, and raiders on horseback who could plunder a village overnight. Now, picture a people determined to protect their families, their food stores, and their way of life. Building homes high up in the cliffs made perfect sense. It wasn't just about the breathtaking views. This was about survival, but we all know the views certainly did not hurt. From up there, you could spot enemies a mile away. The cliffs themselves became a natural wall, turning every home into a fortress, which really emphasizes the way the landscape and terrain helped to foster the community that was able to endure here for so long. But protection was only one reason. There's something spiritual about living among the cliffs, being closer to the sky, to the ancestors, to the forces that shape the world. You can feel the connection. For the Tellem, the cliffs may have represented a bridge between the living and the spirits. Some anthropologists speculate that placing the dead in caves high above ground wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. It kept the ancestors close, watching over the living, an unbroken link between the past and the present. Again, we see the emphasis on community and the ancestors, and having a shared purpose and sense of self and identity, being shaped and molded by the terrain, strengthening the intergenerational bonds of its people. Think about it. Every time a child was born in a Tellem household, they'd grow up with the knowledge that generations before them were resting above, wrapped in woven shrouds, surrounded by pottery and beads, silent witnesses to the unfolding story of their people. It's a powerful image of continuity, a reminder that life was a thread woven through time, binding the living to those who came before. But let's not forget the trade networks that crisscrossed West Africa. Even though the Tellem lived in these seemingly remote cliffs, they weren't isolated. Gold, salt, and stories flowed along the trade routes that linked powerful empires like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. The Tellem were part of this vibrant web of exchange. Traders may have brought new ideas, pottery styles, or textiles that the Tellem adapted to their own needs, while the Tellem exchanged their pottery and cloth for items along the trade routes. Imagine a Tellem trader, dusty from a long journey, arriving at the cliffs with goods from distant lands, an iron bracelet from the Niger Bend perhaps, or a story from Timbuktu. Every cliffside dwelling, every woven shroud, every pot was a statement, a fusion of local ingenuity and outside influence. The Tellem were not just survivors. They were innovators, artists, and bridge builders between worlds. Their story is more than a footnote in history. It's a testament to the human spirit, to the creativity that emerges even in the harshest landscapes. So, as we begin this journey into the world of the Tellem, keep this in mind. These people weren't just cliff dwellers. They were dreamers, architects, and guardians of a legacy that still whispers from the rocks today. Now we'll dive deeper into their origins, where they might have come from, what languages they may have spoken, and how their unique way of life took shape. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up, because the Tellem story is about to unfold in ways you won't believe. We've just peered into the heights of the Bandiagara escarpment. Now let's follow the winding trails of history back to discover how the Tellem came to call these cliffs home. The story of the Tellem isn't just about where they lived. It's about where they came from and how they found themselves perched on the very edge of West Africa's history. Tour 1. First things first, no one knows exactly where the Tellem originated. Archaeologists and historians have spent decades piecing together clues, like ancient detectives following a trail of pottery shards and burial remains. Some believe the Tellem migrated from the savannas of what is now Burkina Faso, or even further, south, drawn by trade routes that crisscross the Sahel like veins of history. Imagine caravans of salt, gold, and stories winding their way northward, each merchant a carrier of culture. But let's not assume the Tellem arrived all at once. Maybe it was more of a slow trickle, families on the move, searching for safety, opportunity, or simply a new horizon. The Sahel was no easy place to live. Droughts could turn grasslands into dust bowls overnight, and powerful neighbors could sweep in like sudden storms. Some researchers think the Tellem's journey was marked by both hope and desperation, a story repeated in human migrations across the world. 3. Picture it. A Tellem scout cresting a rise and spotting the Bandiagara cliffs for the first time. Sheer rock walls bathed in the amber light of the setting sun. To some, those cliffs might have seemed like barriers. But to the Tellem, they were an opportunity, a natural fortress, a place to build not just homes, but an identity. It's a moment that feels almost cinematic. The first footsteps on the ledge, the first hand-carved steps into the rock, the first firelight flickering against the cliff face. The Tellem didn't come empty-handed. They carried knowledge, skills in pottery, weaving, and agriculture that they would adapt to their new cliffside world. Archaeologists have found pottery styles that link the Tellem to other Sahelian cultures, like the Lobi and the Mossi, suggesting that these people were part of a much wider web of trade and cultural exchange. It's a reminder that even in the ancient world, no one was truly isolated. Ideas traveled with people, reshaping traditions like clay on a potter's wheel. But the cliffs did more than just shelter the Tellem. They transformed them. Living in the heights required new ways of thinking, about building, farming, and even dying. Burial sites hidden in the cliffs reveal a culture deeply concerned with the afterlife. The Tellem wrapped their dead in elaborate shrouds and tucked them into rock shelters, high above the living. Was this simply a practical choice, keeping the dead safe from animals and floods? Or did it symbolize a desire to keep the ancestors close, watching over the living from the heights? Some oral traditions hint at an even more spiritual interpretation. Imagine a world where the ancestors dwell in the cliffs above. A world where every shadow, every gust of wind carries a whisper from the past. Maybe the Tellem believed that the higher they placed their dead, the closer they were to the realm of spirits, merging the earthly and the divine. It's a beautiful and haunting idea. Every cliffside burial was both a tomb and a bridge to eternity. But let's not forget the practical side. Living on a cliff wasn't easy. Imagine hauling water, food, and firewood up those precarious paths every single day. Imagine raising children who learned to navigate narrow ledges before they learned to run. The Tellem turned the challenges of the cliff into a way of life, adapting agriculture, storing grain in cliffside granaries, and building homes that clung to the rock like stubborn vines. Every tool, every pot, every rope was a testament to human ingenuity. Yet even in the cliffs, the Tellem weren't cut off from the world. Traders came and went, bringing iron tools from the Niger Bend, copper from the Sahara, and stories from kingdoms like Ghana and Mali. Imagine a Tellem elder standing at the cliff's edge, squinting into the horizon as a caravan approached, dust rising like a sign from the ancestors. The Tellem were part of a network of exchange that reached across the Sahel and beyond. Proof that even in the most remote places, history has a way of finding you. So who were the Tellem, really? Maybe they weren't just a single people, but a tapestry of different groups, farmers, traders, refugees, drawn together by the promise of the cliffs. Maybe the cliffs weren't just a fortress, but a crucible, a place where cultures collided, and a new identity was forged. That's the beauty of history. It's a story half told, waiting for us to add the missing pieces. Next, we're going to climb even higher, literally and metaphorically, to explore how the Tellem built their incredible cliffside homes. From the mud brick marvels to the ingenious ladders and ropes, we will explore they turned vertical rock faces into vertical neighborhoods. Now, let's step into their world, into the very homes they carved into the rock. If you've ever wondered what it was like to live life on the edge, literally, imagine waking up every morning to a view that would take your breath away, overlooking vast plains dotted with baobab trees, the Niger River snaking its way through the distance, and the wind carrying whispers of trade caravans and stories from kingdoms beyond the horizon. That was the view from the Tellem's homes. But these weren't simple huts. They were marvels of ancient engineering. The Tellem were master builders in a vertical world. Using a blend of sun-baked mud brick and timber, they created multi-story dwellings that clung to the cliffside like birds' nests. These structures were often small and rectangular, stacked like puzzle pieces along narrow ledges. Some walls even bore decorative patterns, lines of raised mud or small embedded stones, showing that aesthetics mattered just as much as function. Building on a cliff face wasn't just about defying gravity. It was about defying the odds. Every block of mud brick had to be carried up winding paths or hoisted with ropes. Imagine teams of workers, muscles taut, balancing baskets of wet clay as they climbed, each step a testament to community, spirit, and shared purpose. Construction wasn't just a task, it was a ritual, a social event that bound the community together. Inside, the homes were cozy yet practical. Low doorways conserved heat and added privacy. Some houses had small niches in the walls to hold lamps or precious items, maybe a family heirloom or a fragment of pottery traded from far-off lands. Roofs were made of thatch or timber, skillfully tied and layered to keep out the worst of the Sahel's rains. And don't forget the granaries, those tall, cylindrical silos perched beside the homes like sentinels, protecting the harvest from mold and hungry critters. Food wasn't just stored here, it was celebrated. The Tellem relied on millet, sorghum, and legumes, grown in the valley below and carried up to the cliffs. Picture women with baskets balanced on their heads, climbing narrow ladders with the grace of dancers. Meals were communal affairs, stews bubbling in clay pots over small hearths, the aroma of roasted grains mixing with the scent of smoldering wood. Eating together wasn't just about nourishment, it was about community, laughter, and the telling of stories under a sky full of stars. Water, though, was a different story. The cliffs had no springs of their own, so the Tellem depended on streams and seasonal rivers in the valley below. Gathering water meant daily journeys, down winding paths, through thickets and thorny scrub, with heavy clay pots on every shoulder. It was a chore, but also a lifeline. Perhaps the sound of women singing as they carried their water jars echoed off the cliffs like a chorus of resilience. But let's not romanticize it too much. Life on the cliffs was hard. Every task, cooking, fetching water, repairing homes, came with the added challenge of vertical living. Imagine being a child in this world, learning to scramble across ledges before you could even write your name. Imagine playing hide and seek among the granaries, or helping your mother patch a roof with a mixture of clay and straw. Every day was an adventure and a risk. And then there were the ladders, wooden rungs lashed together with rope, clinging to the cliff face like spider webs. Some were short, connecting one house to another. Others stretched dozens of meters from the valley floor to the uppermost homes. Climbing them required nerve, skill, and trust in the community that maintained them. These ladders weren't just tools. They were lifelines, connecting people to their homes, their granaries, and in some sense, to the sky itself. At night, the cliffs transformed. Fires flickered behind small windows. Shadows danced on the rock face, playing out stories older than any kingdom. Maybe a father told his children about the Toloi who came before them, or of the time the elders saw lights in the sky that danced like spirits. Maybe a mother whispered prayers to the ancestors, whose tombs rested just above their heads. The cliffs weren't just stone. They were alive with stories, laughter, and the quiet resilience of a people who had chosen to live here. So the next time you think of ancient architecture, remember the Tellem. They weren't just builders. They were dreamers who made homes out of cliffs, who transformed adversity into community, who left behind a legacy that still clings to the rocks today. In our next section, we'll climb even higher into the spiritual world of the Tellem to explore their beliefs, burial practices, and the mysteries they left behind in their cliffside tombs. To truly understand the Tellem, we need to look beyond the bricks and ladders. We need to peer into the shadows of their caves, the echoes of their rituals, and the whispers of their dead. This is where the Tellem's story transforms from history to mystery, into the realm of spirits and ceremonies. If you've ever wondered how ancient people understood life and death, the Tellem offer us a window, literally carved into the cliffs. High above their homes, nestled in shallow caves and narrow ledges, the Tellem left behind thousands of burial sites. Imagine hiking the cliff paths today and suddenly finding a small opening. Inside, fragile human remains wrapped in decaying shrouds, clay pots, beads, and the faint trace of a long-extinguished fire. It's like stepping into a lost world where the living and the dead shared a constant dialogue. These burial sites are more than archaeological treasures. They're keys to understanding the Tellem's beliefs about life, death, and everything in between. Each burial cave was carefully prepared. Bodies wrapped in intricately woven textiles, surrounded by pottery, jewelry, and sometimes bundles of millet. These were not random offerings. They were symbols, tokens of memory, sustenance for the journey beyond, and perhaps even passports to the realm of ancestors. But why bury the dead in the cliffs? Was it purely practical, keeping remains safe from predators and floods? Or did it carry a deeper meaning? Some scholars believe that by placing the dead high above the ground, the Tellem ensured that the ancestors remained close to the sky, closer to the gods. In many African traditions, the sky is associated with the divine, the domain of spirits, thunder, and transformation. Maybe the cliffs were more than a fortress. Maybe they were a stairway to the ancestors. Picture this: a funeral procession winding its way up the cliff path, family members carrying the wrapped body of a loved one, chanting songs that blended grief with hope. At the top, elders gathered to perform final rites, words spoken to guide the departed to the next world, to ask for blessings, to keep the living safe. The cave entrance darkens as the body is placed within, one more soul joining the chorus of the cliffs. The echo of drums fades, replaced by the sighing of the wind, a reminder that life continues, even as the dead watch from above. Inside these burial caves, archaeologists have found objects that hint at the Tellem's understanding of the afterlife. Small statues, amulets, and carved figures lie among the bones, guardians perhaps, or messengers to the spirits. Some of these objects are so worn that their details have faded, like memories half remembered, but their presence is undeniable, a sign that the Tellem believed in connections that went beyond the grave. And what about the living? How did the Tellem honor their ancestors? Some scholars suggest that the Tellem practiced ancestor veneration, regular rituals to keep the spirits close, to ask for guidance and protection. Maybe on certain days, families climbed the cliffs to bring offerings, millet beer, grains, small tokens, to the caves where their loved ones rested. Imagine children sitting by the flickering light of a clay lamp, listening to stories of the ancestors whose bones lay just beyond the shadows. Speculation grows even richer when you consider the spiritual specialists who might have guided the community. Every society has its intermediaries, shamans, priests, diviners, those who bridge the gap between the seen and unseen. Could the Tellem have had their own spiritual leaders, chosen for their wisdom or connection to the spirits? Imagine a figure, draped in intricate textiles, eyes bright with knowledge of the ancestors, leading a ceremony at dusk as the wind carried prayers to the sky. The Tellem's burial practices also reveal a society where the line between life and death was not so sharply drawn. Living in such close proximity to the tombs, every day was a reminder of those who had gone before. It's as if the cliffs themselves were a living archive, a constant presence in daily life. Every echo off the rock could have been a whisper from an ancestor, every shifting shadow a reminder that the dead were never truly gone. Some Dogon elders, descendants of those who came after the Tellem, speak of the Tellem with a mixture of reverence and mystery. They call them the people we found here, attributing to them abilities that bordered on the supernatural. Some even say the Tellem were giants, their bones larger than life. A folk memory, perhaps, of a people whose way of life felt impossibly grand. Whether literal or symbolic, these stories remind us that the Tellem occupy a space between history and legend. So the next time you gaze at a cliff, remember that for the Tellem, it was more than a wall of rock. It was a home, a fortress, and a bridge between worlds. Their burial caves stand as silent witnesses to a worldview that saw life and death not as opposites, but as threads in the same tapestry. In our next section, we'll explore the artistry of the Tellem, their textiles, pottery, and the everyday objects that tell us who they were. Stay tuned, because the Tellem story continues to unfold in the most fascinating ways. We've climbed the cliffs of the Tellem, peeked into their homes, and peered into their sacred burial caves. Now, let's unravel the next layer of their story, how the Tellem expressed themselves through their art and culture. Because if history is a tapestry, the Tellem were its weavers, literally and metaphorically. Imagine a world where every thread tells a story, where textiles weren't just clothes, but symbols of identity, status, and even spiritual protection. For the Tellem, weaving wasn't just a craft, it was a language. Some of the finest textiles found in their burial caves are so delicately woven they rival anything produced in later West African kingdoms. Strips of cotton, dyed in earthy hues, and patterned with subtle geometric designs, speak of both artistry and meaning. Scholars believe that Tellem textiles weren't just functional. Some were shrouds for the dead, carefully wrapped around bodies before being placed in cliffside tombs. Others might have marked social status, certain colors or patterns reserved for elders, warriors, or spiritual leaders. Picture a young Tellem, girl learning to weave from her mother, the loom humming as she creates a fabric that might one day wrap her grandfather's remains or serve as a dowry gift. In those patterns, stories were told, prayers were whispered, and identity was claimed. But weaving wasn't the only art form in which the Tellem excelled. Let's talk about pottery, another craft that reveals both daily life and deeper beliefs. Archaeologists have uncovered clay pots and vessels in Tellem sites that range from simple cooking wares to intricately decorated ceremonial pieces. Some bear burnished surfaces and incised patterns. Others are adorned with small symbolic motifs, zigzags, dots, perhaps even representations of spirits or ancestors. Pottery wasn't just for the living. It accompanied the dead into the burial caves. Maybe it held food offerings, a final meal for the journey to the ancestors. Maybe it carried millet beer, a staple in many West African rituals. Some vessels show signs of repeated use, their surfaces smoothed by years of handling. Imagine a grandmother's pot, used every day to cook meals for her family, then carefully cleaned and placed beside her as a token of love and continuity. These pots were more than clay. They were touchstones of memory. And let's not forget the tools of everyday life. Iron blades, farming implements, and hunting weapons have been found in Tellem sites, each one telling a story of survival and ingenuity. Iron technology likely came to the Tellem through trade, with neighboring regions, evidence of their connection to wider Sahelian networks. A simple hoe or knife might not look like art, but in the hands of a Tellem blacksmith, it became an object of pride, shaped by the rhythms of daily labor and the demands of a challenging landscape. Some of these tools were so well crafted that they outlasted their owners. Imagine a blacksmith's hammer passed down from father to son, a family heirloom that connected generations. Maybe a mother's cooking pot bore the marks of years of meals shared by the fire, its soot-covered walls an unspoken record of family life. The Tellem's material culture was a living archive, each object a witness to the community's journey. Then there's jewelry, a language of adornment that spoke of identity, status, and maybe even spiritual power. Beads of clay, shell, and stone have been found in Tellem burials, strung together in patterns that might have carried meaning now lost to time. Some beads likely came from faraway lands, carried by traders who braved the Sahel's harsh landscapes. Each bead was a tiny ambassador, a reminder that even in the cliffs, the Tellem were connected to a world of stories and exchanges. Some of the most enigmatic artifacts found among the Tellem are small figurines, carved from wood or molded from clay, whose purposes we can only guess at today. Were they toys, amulets, household gods? One wooden figure, worn smooth by centuries of touch, has a haunting simplicity, a reminder that the Tellem, like us, grappled with mysteries and fears, hopes and dreams. Maybe it was placed on a household altar, or maybe it watched over a child's sleep, a silent guardian against the unknown. It's tempting to imagine a Tellem artisan at work, hands deftly shaping clay, eyes intent on a pattern that only they understand. In the background, the sounds of children laughing, women grinding millet, the distant echoes of drums from a neighboring village. Every pot, every textile, every bead was part of a living culture, a world that blended the practical with the spiritual, the everyday with the eternal. So the next time you see a fragment of cloth or a broken pot in a museum, remember the Tellem. Remember the hands that shaped it, the stories woven into its fibers, the songs that might have accompanied its creation. Now we'll step beyond the cliffs to explore how the Tellem connected with their neighbors through trade, conflict, and cultural exchange. Because even in the heights, the Tellem were part of a world that stretched far beyond the horizon. From the colors woven into their textiles and the patterns etched into their pottery, it's clear that the Tellem were a people deeply invested in the art of expression. But these creative traditions didn't develop in isolation. The Tellem lived in a world where trade routes snaked across the Sahel, connecting them with powerful neighbors in distant lands. Even from their high perches on the Bandiagara cliffs, they were part of a dynamic network that wove together commerce, culture, and conflict. Archaeological evidence shows that the Tellem's reach extended well beyond their cliffside homes. Traders carried iron tools from the Niger Bend, copper ornaments from even farther afield, and beads crafted from shells or semi-precious stones that could have originated hundreds of miles away. A single bead might have passed through the hands of dozens of traders before finding its resting place in a Tellem burial cave. Each object carried a story, a sign that even in the most remote corners, the Tellem were participants in a vast regional economy. Some of these traders likely hailed from the powerful Ghana Empire to the west, whose wealth in gold made it a magnet for commerce. Others came from the territories that would later form the Mali Empire, a rising power that would one day overshadow even Ghana. When a caravan arrived in the valleys below the escarpment, it brought more than goods. It carried news of distant battles, royal decrees, and whispered rumors of shifting alliances. The Tellem, though seemingly perched above the fray, would have been acutely aware of these changes. Every trader's arrival was a potential lifeline or a threat. Trade, however, was only one side of the Tellem's interaction with their neighbors. Marriage alliances may have tied them to communities on the plains, forging kinship networks that spanned kingdoms. A Tellem bride might carry textiles and pottery as gifts to her new family, sharing the artistry of the cliffs with the lowland villages. Her songs, recipes, and beliefs would mingle with local traditions, gradually blending cultures in ways historians can only guess at. Yet the Tellem's relationship with their neighbors wasn't always peaceful. The Sahel's history is marked by periods of conflict, raids, and shifting power dynamics. The Bandiagara escarpment itself may have been chosen as a refuge from these very threats. Its sheer cliffs offered a natural fortress, an advantage that the Tellem likely understood from the moment they settled there. Living high above the plains meant that any approaching threat could be spotted long before it reached the community. Ladders could be raised, paths blocked, and defensive measures put into place. In this way, the Tellem cliffs were both home and stronghold, a testament to resilience in a landscape where security could never be taken for granted. Their architecture bears witness to this dual function. Some dwellings appear almost hidden in the rock, accessible only by narrow paths or precarious ladders. Defensive granaries and storehouses were built into crevices that would have been nearly impossible to reach for outsiders unfamiliar with the terrain. Even the arrangement of homes, clustered together with interconnected platforms, suggests a community designed to defend itself as much as to live. Every doorway, every rooftop may have doubled as a lookout post. But to see the i.e. Tellem only through the lens of defense would be to miss the richness of their cultural exchange. The pottery styles found in their homes and burial caves reveal influences from neighboring groups, motifs and techniques that hint at a dialogue between communities. Perhaps a Tellem potter learned a new incising technique from a trader passing through. Maybe a visiting artisan shared a different way of shaping clay that found its way into Tellem kitchens and tombs alike. Culture is rarely static. It's a river that carries ideas along with goods, blending traditions into something new. Religious and spiritual exchanges may have flowed along these same currents. Some archaeologists suggest that the Tellem shared certain beliefs with their neighbors, including reverence for ancestors and rituals to ensure harmony between the living and the dead. A trader from the plains might have brought a story of a powerful rain spirit, and a Tellem elder might have added that spirit to their own pantheon, weaving new ideas into the tapestry of faith. Perhaps the Tellem held joint ceremonies with neighboring villages to call for rain or to mark the harvest, gatherings where music, dance, and shared feasts blurred the lines between communities. These encounters weren't always about trade and ceremony. Oral traditions from the Dogon people, the group that would eventually move into the cliffs, tell of the Tellem as an earlier people, already living in the escarpment when the Dogon arrived. Some stories speak of the Tellem as giants, able to reach places others couldn't, a memory perhaps of their cliffside homes. Others hint at conflicts, as the Dogon expanded and established themselves in the region. Whether these stories recall literal clashes or more gradual processes of migration and assimilation, they remind us that no people's story is written in isolation. The arrival of the Dogon represents one of the greatest turning points in the Tellem's history. As Dogon communities settled in the escarpment, they integrated some of the Tellem's knowledge, reusing homes and granaries, inheriting trade connections, and perhaps even absorbing aspects of Tellem art and belief. But the process was complex. Did the Tellem resist, fight, or simply fade into the background? Did they intermarry, sharing their traditions in ways that shaped the Dogon's future culture? The cliff dwellings themselves became a kind of palimpsest, a layered record of human occupation that even today defies easy answers. As trade routes shifted and empires rose and fell, the Tellem's world continued to evolve. Gold and salt, commodities that could make or break kingdoms, passed near the Bandiagara escarpment, ensuring that even this remote fortress remained tethered to the currents of power and wealth. Traders came with news of the Mali Empire's expansion, of new rulers in distant lands, of conflicts that might one day reach the cliffs. Every new arrival may have brought both opportunity and warning, reminding the Tellem that even in their high places, they were part of a larger web of human endeavor. In these encounters and exchanges, the Tellem revealed themselves as both resilient and adaptable. They built homes that defied gravity, crafted art that honored ancestors, and engaged with neighbors in ways that left their mark on the region's history. Through trade, marriage, conflict, and cooperation, the Tellem story is woven into the larger story of West Africa, a testament to the connections that bind us all, even across the most formidable of cliffs. The story of the Tellem's high cliff dwellings is inseparable from the arrival of the Dogon people, a group whose own legacy would eventually eclipse that of the cliff builders. The Dogon's movement into the Bandiagara escarpment marks a turning point not just for the Tellem but for the entire region's cultural landscape. It's a story of migration, adaptation, and the complex interplay between continuity and change. Oral traditions from the Dogon themselves speak of their ancestors arriving from the west, seeking refuge from pressures that threatened their way of life. Some stories say they fled from Islamic expansion and the encroachment of more powerful kingdoms. Others hint at environmental shifts that forced communities to move in search of more arable land and secure territory. Whether driven by conflict, climate, or simply the human search for a better home, the Dogon's journey led them to the cliffs of the Tellem. What they found there was a world already marked by centuries of human habitation. The Tellem's cliff dwellings, granaries, homes, and burial caves testify to a people who had made the rock face their own. For the Dogon, arriving in this landscape was both an opportunity and a challenge. The Tellem structures offered immediate shelter and storage, a ready-made infrastructure carved into the cliffs. But they also carried the memory of those who had built them, a memory that lingered in every weathered ladder and every granary lid. The relationship between the Tellem and the arriving Dogon is difficult to reconstruct. Some archaeologists suggest a period of overlap when both groups shared the escarpment, trading, intermarrying, perhaps even sharing religious practices. Imagine a Dogon trader arriving at a Tellem home with iron tools or woven cloth, a smile of greeting exchanged, goods passed hand to hand. In the glow of a communal fire, songs might blend, languages intertwine, and for a moment, the barriers between cultures blur. Other scholars propose a more abrupt transition, a period of conflict or displacement that saw the Tellem gradually withdraw, leaving their cliff dwellings to be repurposed by the newcomers. The strategic advantages of the cliffs would not have gone unnoticed by the Dogon, who themselves were seeking security in a region where power was often defined by geography. The Tellem's architecture, already adapted to defense, would have been a priceless inheritance for any group seeking refuge. Regardless of how the transition unfolded, the Dogon left their mark on the escarpment. They modified some Tellem structures, adding their own unique touches: conical granaries with pointed roofs, new decorative motifs on walls and doors. The Dogon's artistic style brought fresh interpretations to the rock face, yet the traces of the Tellem remained, layered beneath each new addition like a palimpsest of human endeavor. A wall might bear the faint outline of a Tellem painting beneath a newer Dogon carving, a silent testament to the merging of histories. The Dogon also brought with them a rich cosmology, a spiritual framework that would become one of West Africa's most renowned traditions. Their beliefs in the Nomo, the ancestral spirits, and the complex rituals associated with the mask, dances, and the Sigui ceremony transformed the escarpment into a sacred landscape. Yet even here, echoes of the Tellem persisted. Some Dogon elders speak of the Tellem as spirits themselves, ancestral presences inhabiting the caves and cliffs, sometimes helpful, sometimes mischievous. In this way, the Tellem never truly vanished. They became part of the spiritual geography, woven into the Dogon worldview. It's possible that the Tellem's burial sites, those high cliffside caves, helped shape the Dogon's own funerary practices. The Dogon placed great importance on the proper burial of the dead and the veneration of ancestors. Perhaps climbing to the burial caves, the Dogon felt the weight of the Tellem's presence, prompting them to integrate some of these practices into their own rites. A Dogon elder might have looked upon a Tellem burial shroud, its patterns faded with time, and wondered about the lives it once touched. The Tellem's influence extended beyond architecture and burial. Pottery shards found in Dogon sites bear a resemblance to earlier Tellem designs, suggesting that some techniques persisted through the transition. A potter's wheel might turn, shaping clay in the same way a Tellem artisan had centuries before. The knowledge passed from hand to hand even as identities shifted. Likewise, certain weaving patterns found among the Dogon echo those of the Tellem, a subtle thread of continuity in a fabric otherwise marked by change. It's easy to romanticize this period as a seamless blending of cultures, but the reality was likely far more complex. Competition for land and resources could have sparked conflicts, with skirmishes over water sources, fields, or trade routes. The Dogon's gradual adaptation to the cliffs might have included negotiations, alliances, and tensions that left no mark in the archaeological record but that shaped lives all the same. Human history is rarely a simple story of replacement. It's a constant dance of adaptation and survival. Even so, the Tellem's legacy survived in ways that the Dogon themselves acknowledged. To this day, some Dogon families refer to certain cliffside granaries as Tellem, a label that marks both reverence and otherness. These structures stand as reminders of those who came before, a people whose lives were bound to the cliffs in ways that shaped the very identity of the region. Every time a Dogon farmer stores millet in a granary once built by the Tellem, it's an act of continuity, a silent handshake across the centuries. The Dogon's arrival and settlement didn't erase the Tellem, it transformed their memory. The escarpment became a living archive where each generation added its own layer to the story. Tellem homes became Dogon homes. Tellem burial caves became places of mystery and reverence. Even as the Dogon developed their own vibrant traditions, art, music, ritual, they carried forward the echo of those who had come before. In this way, the Tellem's story didn't end with the arrival of the Dogon. It expanded. It became part of a new narrative, a shared inheritance that shaped the future of the escarpment and the communities who call it home. From the first step of a Dogon elder on a Tellem path to the last echo of a Tellem potter's wheel, the cliffs witnessed a transformation that was at once an ending and a beginning. The transformation of the Bandiagara escarpment with the arrival of the Dogon did not erase the Tellem's presence. Instead, it reshaped their legacy into something more elusive, yet equally powerful, a memory etched into the cliffs themselves, a presence felt in every carved step and every granary door. For centuries after the Tellem's departure, their influence continued to ripple through the lives of those who made the escarpment their home. One of the most striking legacies of the Tellem is the physical mark they left behind. The architecture of the cliffs is a living testament to their ingenuity and resilience. Even today, Dogon communities rely on Tellem-built structures, granaries, homes, and burial sites, often refurbishing them to suit their needs. The placement of granaries high on narrow ledges speaks of a people who understood the challenges of their environment and responded with creativity. Each time a Dogon farmer climbs a ladder to store millet in a granary that once sheltered Tellem grain, they participate in a tradition of adaptation and survival that has lasted centuries. These physical remnants are more than just practical. They are infused with a sense of the sacred. The Dogon speak of the Tellem with a mixture of awe and caution, referring to them as spirits of the cliffs, guardians of ancient wisdom, and sometimes as mischievous entities capable of interfering with the living. In Dogon cosmology, the cliffs themselves are more than rock. They are places of power, shaped by the actions of those who came before. Every cave and ledge carries a story, a memory of lives lived and struggles faced. Dogon oral traditions preserve fragments of the Tellem's story, though often transformed by the passage of time and the needs of the present. Some elders describe the Tellem as giants, taller and stronger than any living person, a detail that might stem from the visual impact of the towering cliffside structures, which seemed to defy human scale. Others say the Tellem possessed knowledge of magic or had a special relationship with the spirits of the land, enabling them to build where others dared not. These stories serve both as explanations and as bridges, linking the Dogon to the ancient builders whose homes they inherited. The Tellem's burial practices, too, have left a deep imprint on the escarpment's cultural landscape. The cliffside. Tombs, filled with the remains of countless ancestors, stand as silent witnesses to a belief system that saw death not as an end, but as a transformation. The Dogon, with their own intricate funeral rites, may have drawn inspiration from these ancient customs. The high placement of tombs, the careful wrapping of bodies, the inclusion of personal items. These elements speak of a worldview where the ancestors remained close, both physically and spiritually. Archaeologists who have explored these burial caves often describe a sense of reverence, a feeling that each discovery is a conversation with the past. Textiles, pottery, and tools found alongside human remains tell stories of everyday life and the values that shaped it. A woman's spindle whorl, smoothed by years of use, becomes a testament to the labor and skill that sustained a community. A child's bead necklace, fragile and worn, hints at the innocence and joy that persisted even in a world of hardship. These objects connect us to the Tellem in ways that words cannot, reminding us that every society leaves behind more than just structures. It leaves behind humanity. The Tellem's artistic legacy also endures in subtler forms. Patterns seen in Dogon textiles and pottery bear echoes of Tellem designs, as if the hands of long-gone weavers still guide the threads. Some motifs, like geometric shapes or repeating lines, may have originated as Tellem symbols of protection or identity, later adopted and reinterpreted by the Dogon. This transmission of design is not just an artistic phenomenon. It's a cultural dialogue that spans generations, a visual conversation between past and present. The legacy of the Tellem is not confined to the escarpment alone. Scholars who study the Sahel's complex web of trade and migration see in the Tellem's story a reflection of the region's broader history, a history of movement, adaptation, and exchange. The Tellem were part of a network that stretched from the Niger River to the Sahara and beyond, connecting them to powerful empires and distant markets. Their trade in pottery, textiles, and possibly iron tools speaks of a people who balanced isolation with connection, resilience with openness. In this way, the Tellem's story becomes a microcosm of West Africa's dynamic past. This interconnectedness challenges the notion of the Tellem as an isolated people hidden in their cliffs. Instead, it suggests a community that navigated the complexities of their world with skill and nuance. They may have chosen the cliffs for protection, but they did not wall themselves off from the world. Traders still climbed the paths, carrying goods and news. Travelers found shelter in their homes. Alliances and rivalries shaped their days. The Tellem's legacy, then, is not just about the structures they left behind, but about the way they wove themselves into the tapestry of their time. In the modern era, the Tellem's legacy faces new challenges. Tourism, development, and the demands of a growing population have placed pressures on the escarpment's delicate balance. Tourists from around the world come to marvel at the Dogon architecture, often unaware that the oldest structures belong to a people long gone. Scholars strive to document and preserve the Tellem's contributions, but erosion, looting, and time itself conspire to erase their traces. Each collapsed granary, each stolen artifact, is a thread torn from the story, a reminder of how fragile cultural memory can be. Yet there is hope in the work of local communities, archaeologists, and heritage organizations who strive to protect the escarpment's legacy. Dogon guides often speak proudly of the Tellem as the ancestors of their homes, weaving their stories into tours that educate visitors about the region's rich history. Efforts to preserve and document the Tellem's burial sites, pottery fragments, and textiles ensure that their voices are not lost to the wind. In these acts of remembrance, the Tellem's legacy endures, not just in museums or academic papers, but in the hearts and minds of those who walk the cliffs today. The echoes of the Tellem are not just physical, they are spiritual, cultural, and human. Every ladder climbed to a granary, every pot shared among family, every song sung under the starlit sky is part of a living tradition that stretches back to those ancient cliff dwellers. Their story reminds us that history is not just a series of events, but a living thread that weaves us together across time and space. As the sun sets over the Bandiagara escarpment, casting long shadows across the cliff face. One can almost hear the whispers of the Tellem, voices carried on the wind, stories waiting to be told. In this place, the past is not a distant land, but a presence that shapes the present. The Tellem's legacy is a testament to the resilience of human communities, to the power of memory, and to the enduring beauty of lives lived on the edge of the world. The cliffs of the Bandiagara escarpment stand not only as a testament to the endurance of the Tellem, but also as a challenge to those who seek to understand them. Long after the last Tellem footsteps faded into silence, their presence lingered, hidden in the shadows of burial caves, crumbling granaries, and the whispered stories of those who came after. For centuries, the Tellem remained a mystery, spoken of by Dogon elders as giants or spirits, but rarely as the flesh and blood people who once called the cliffs their home. It wasn't until the 20th century that scholars began to look beyond the legends and into the rocks themselves. Early explorers, drawn by tales of the Dogon's unique cosmology and the dramatic beauty of the cliffs, found themselves confronted with a deeper puzzle. Who had built the structures that even the Dogon claimed they had simply found here? French ethnographers and anthropologists, arriving in the 1930s, first began to systematically document the Tellem sites, opening burial caves, cataloging artifacts, and trying to piece together a history that had been hidden in plain sight. The finds. Initial findings were tantalizing. In burial caves high above the valley floor, researchers discovered human remains wrapped in intricately woven shrouds, fabrics so finely crafted they seemed to defy the centuries. Alongside the bodies lay pottery, beads, tools, and sometimes small bundles of millet, a final offering for the journey beyond. Each cave was a time capsule, a silent witness to the lives and beliefs of a people whose name had nearly been lost to time. But the first archaeologists faced challenges beyond the technical. The Tellem's burial caves were, and remain, sacred to the Dogon people. Many Dogon communities regard the caves as ancestral sites, places where the spirits of the Tellem still dwell. Researchers had to balance their curiosity with respect, navigating complex relationships with local communities. Some elders agreed to allow studies, recognizing the value of understanding their own heritage. Others feared that disturbing the graves might anger the spirits or invite misfortune. In these encounters, the lines between archaeology and anthropology blurred. Scholars were not just excavating bones and pots, they were engaging with a living culture that had inherited the cliffs. Every object lifted from the dust carried with it the weight of belief and the potential to either heal or harm the delicate fabric of memory. In this way, the Tellem story became not just a matter of academic interest, but a dialogue between past and present. As the decades passed, the study of the Tellem became more nuanced. Radiocarbon dating, textile analysis, and comparative studies with other West African sites revealed that the Tellem were not a single static culture, but part of a broader Sahelian mosaic. Their pottery styles showed influences from the Niger. Their burial practices echoed traditions found as far as Burkina Faso and beyond. The cliffs were a meeting point, a place where cultures merged and adapted, leaving behind a material record that spoke of connection as much as it did of isolation. One of the most intriguing findings came from the study of Tellem textiles. Preserved by the dry conditions of the burial caves, these fabrics revealed a level of craftsmanship that rivaled even later West African weaving traditions. Patterns of stripes, checks, and geometric motifs hinted at meanings now lost, symbols of clan, identity, status, or spiritual protection. Modern weavers who studied these fragments found inspiration in their designs, weaving echoes of Tellem patterns into new cloths that blended ancient and contemporary threads. The Tellem's tools and pottery, too, became a focus of study. Clay pots, some with burnished surfaces and incised decorations, reflected a style both practical and expressive. Scholars debated whether certain motifs were purely decorative or carried symbolic meanings. Spirals that might represent water, zigzags that could stand for lightning or fertility. Each piece became a puzzle, a fragment of a language waiting to be deciphered. Yet for all the physical evidence unearthed by archaeologists, some of the Tellem's story remains stubbornly out of reach. Their language is lost. No written records survive, and oral traditions provide only hints. Who were their leaders? How did they resolve disputes or forge alliances? What songs did they sing to welcome a child into the world or to mourn the passing of an elder? These are questions that Pots and Bones can only whisper about, leaving room for imagination and humility in the face of history's silences. Modern interpretations of the Tellem are as varied as the people who study them. Some researchers emphasize the Tellem's adaptability, pointing to their cliffside homes as evidence of resilience in the face of environmental and social pressures. Others focus on the spiritual dimension, exploring how the Tellem's burial practices might reveal beliefs about the afterlife and the continuity between generations. Still others see the Tellem as a bridge, an intermediary culture that linked older Sahelian societies with the Dogon and later Mali kingdoms. For the Dogon, the Tellem remain both ancestors and enigmas. Some Dogon guides, sharing the history of the cliffs with visitors, describe the Tellem as giants who could reach places no one else could. Others speak of the Tellem as master builders whose skills laid the foundation for the Dogon's own settlements. In local rituals, references to the Tellem sometimes emerge, testament to a memory that refuses to fade, even after centuries of change. The cliffs themselves bear silent witness to these interpretations. A ladder leaning against a rock face might have been first placed there by a Tellem craftsman, then repaired by a Dogon farmer, and finally examined by a visiting archaeologist. Each hand that touched it left its mark, each generation adding a layer of meaning. The Bandiagara escarpment is not a static monument. It's a living archive where history, myth, and identity intertwine. The modern world, too, has left its mark on the Tellem legacy. Tourism brings visitors eager to explore the Dogon's famous architecture and cosmology, but many are unaware of the Tellem's deeper story. Some scholars worry that the rush to showcase the cliff's wonders risks overshadowing the fragile evidence of the Tellem's lives. Looting and erosion threaten the burial caves, while climate change accelerates the decay of ancient structures. Each lost artifact is a piece of the puzzle that may never be recovered. Yet there is hope in the partnerships that have emerged between archaeologists, Dogon communities, and heritage organizations. Efforts to document and preserve the Tellem sites often include local guides and elders, ensuring that the work respects both the scientific and spiritual dimensions of the cliffs. Community museums, educational programs, and sustainable tourism initiatives strive to balance discovery with stewardship. In these collaborations, the Tellem's story continues, not as a relic of the past, but as a living part of the region's identity. For the people who live in the shadow of the cliffs today, the Tellem are not just an archaeological curiosity. They are a reminder of the ingenuity that can arise in the harshest of environments, of the importance of honoring the past while forging the future. Every child who learns the story of the Tellem inherits a sense of connection to a history that is both local and universal, a history that speaks of resilience, creativity, and the enduring human spirit. In the end, the Tellem's rediscovery is a story not just of archaeologists and scholars, but of communities reclaiming their own heritage. It's a testament to the idea that every ruin, every pot, every worn step has something to teach us about who we are and where we come from. As long as the cliffs stand, the Tellem's story will remain, etched in stone, whispered in the wind, and alive in the hearts of those who call this place home. The cliffs of the Bandiagara escarpment hold more than ancient dwellings and burial caves. They hold a memory, a whisper of lives once lived, stories half remembered, and echoes of laughter and sorrow that refuse to fade. The Tellem, the original. Cliff dwellers, left behind more than walls of mud brick and ropes of woven fiber. They left behind a legacy woven into the very rock, a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, humanity finds ways to thrive, create, and remember. When we trace the Tellem story, we see a people who understood the art of adaptation. They carved homes into cliffs not just to survive, but to belong, to make a home in a place that seemed at first glance inhospitable. Every granary, every ladder, every burial cave was a testament to the Tellem's resilience and ingenuity. Their homes, perched high above the valleys, speak of a community that learned to live on the edge, literally and figuratively. It's a lesson that still resonates today in a world that often feels equally precarious. Their legacy also lies in the beauty they created. The Tellem's textiles, their pottery, their small carved figures, these weren't mere objects of utility. They were expressions of identity, symbols of belonging and belief. A single bead found in a burial cave carries within it the touch of a craftsman's hands, the memory of trade routes that connected the Sahel to the wider world, and the quiet dignity of a people who found meaning in the everyday. The Tellem remind us that art is not just decoration. It is a language of the soul, a way to speak across time. But perhaps the most profound part of the Tellem's legacy is their relationship with the land itself. The Bandiagara escarpment is not a gentle place. Its cliffs are sheer, its paths are narrow, and its climate demands patience and resourcefulness. Yet the Tellem transformed this rugged landscape into a home, an architectural marvel and a spiritual refuge. They taught us that even the most challenging environments can become sanctuaries if approached with respect and understanding. The Dogon, who came after, carried forward this relationship with the land. They inherited the Tellem's structures, their granaries, and perhaps even some of their rituals. In this way, the Tellem's presence was not erased by time, but absorbed into the living culture of those who followed. The Dogon's respect for the Tellem is evident in the stories they tell, stories of giants, spirits, and ancestral wisdom. These tales, though sometimes fantastical, keep the Tellem alive in the minds of new generations. They ensure that the cliff dwellers are never truly forgotten. Modern archaeology has helped to illuminate the Tellem's story, but it has also highlighted how much we will never know. The Tellem left no written records, no chronicles of kings or lists of conquests. Their language is lost, their songs are silent, and the details of their daily lives are glimpsed only in the artifacts they left behind. A cooking pot, a spindle whorl, a worn bead. Each is a clue, but none can fully capture the complexity of their experience. In this, the Tellem teach us humility. They remind us that history is always incomplete, that every generation must listen carefully for the voices of the past. Yet even in this silence, the Tellem's story resonates. Their homes stand as a challenge to assumptions about what is possible. Their burial caves invite us to reflect on how we honor our dead and maintain bonds with our ancestors. Their trade networks remind us that no community is an island, that every people is part of a larger web of relationships that stretches across lands and centuries. Their art and craftsmanship show us that beauty can flourish even in the most rugged places, and that creativity is a universal human trait. In the present day, the Tellem's legacy faces new challenges. Tourism, climate change, and the pressures of modern life threaten the delicate balance of the escarpment's cultural heritage. Yet there is hope in the efforts of local communities, scholars, and heritage organizations who work to protect and share the Tellem's story. Guides lead visitors to the caves with reverence, sharing not just facts but feelings. The sense of awe that comes from standing in a place where generations have left their mark. Museums and cultural centers preserve and interpret the Tellem's artifacts, offering windows into a world that is both distant and immediate. In these acts of remembrance, the Tellem live on. Every time a child hears the story of the Tellem's cliffside homes, every time a weaver studies the patterns in an ancient shroud, every time an archaeologist carefully lifts a pot from the dust, the Tellem's legacy grows. They become more than a chapter in a textbook. They become part of the living fabric of the present, shaping how we understand ourselves and our place in history. Standing at the edge of the escarpment as the sun sets, casting its golden light across the cliffs, it's easy to imagine the Tellem watching, their presence woven into the wind. Perhaps their spirits still roam the paths they once climbed, listening to the voices of those who tell their story. In that moment, the distance between past and present collapses, and we are reminded that history is not a straight line, but a circle, a conversation that never ends. The Tellem's final legacy is one of connection. They connect us to the land, to each other, and to the generations who came before. Their story challenges us to look beyond the surface, to see the humanity in every artifact, and to honor the resilience of those who built homes on the edge of the world. In a time when divisions often define our understanding of the past, the Tellem invite us to see history as a shared inheritance, a reminder that every culture leaves a mark, and that every mark is part of a larger story. As we leave the cliffs behind, let us carry the Tellem's legacy with us. Let us remember that the past is not just a collection of ruins, but a living presence that shapes who we are. Let us honor the creativity, courage, and community that defined the Tellem, and let us listen for their voices in the wind, reminding us that the cliffs are not just stone but memory, a memory that belongs to us all.